Welcome to the next episode of Brandland. I'm Garrett Justice, and today I am joined by John Oxford, who's the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Renaissance Bank, and a million other things that we'll talk about here in a minute. But John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, especially considering what all's going on in the world. I'm doing actually fantastic.
Yeah, I know it's crazy time, but actually some highlights too, because you're out there in Mississippi. Is that right? And today's a special day where you're at in Mississippi. Tell us all about that.
It is. So we're headquartered in Tupelo, Mississippi, which we're recording today. This will date the podcast, but we're recording today on January 8th, which is Elvis's birthday. Yeah. He's our most famous son. He was born about a mile here from our corporate headquarters. So today's a big day for Tupelo. Obviously, we're not having parades or anything like that with social distancing, but they're doing some small stuff. But yeah, normally there's a big deal and there's a lot of tourists here and a lot of international tourism. So sort of an appropriate day to have me on the show, being I'm in Tupelo and today's Elvis's birthday. So it's one of the most famous things we have about Tupelo.
I love that. Yeah, it just kind of worked out too. So that's a cool highlight of, your area where you live. So I love that you brought that up. So John, really excited to dive into our topic today. I know, like I said, you're the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Renaissance Bank, but also a co-host of Marketing Money Podcast. So you get this whole podcast thing. And I've also written a book. You're an Amazon bestselling author of No More Next Time, Marketing in the Age of Distraction. So I'm really excited to kind of pick your brain and hear more about that. But, before we do that, would you mind giving our listeners a little bit more of a flavor of your career so far and what Renaissance Bank does?
Yeah. So my career, interesting that you use the word flavor. That's like a planned segue. My first job was as a taste tester.
I was going to ask about this. So I'm so glad you're bringing it up.
So kind of like I was like the LeBron James of middle level marketing. Like I started out in high school as like already doing marketing, when all my friends were sweating and mowing lawns and babysitting and all that good stuff. I was literally sitting at a table and eating food and watching commercials to connect the experience of that food and packaging to what they were going to show on TV on Saturday morning cartoons. Wow. And I was well paid for it too, because the problem with it, you couldn't work a lot because you could only eat for so long before you were full and your palate was then distorted from what you ate after so many, crackers and water to clean it. So they paid you really well, but it was short. So I would make more than my friends would make mowing lawns and lifeguarding and all the typical jobs you have as a teenager. When I would go in these kind of, conference rooms as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and I would eat food and rate it, work 2 days a week for 2 hours and did really well. And then I would go, shoot hoops and hang out with all my buddies after.
Sounds like, a dream job for a 17-year-old kid. Like how did you manage to find that?
I didn't have braces. There was like certain qualifications. I was opinionated. They did like a bunch of like pre-reads and testing. They came to our high school and they said, we have room for like 2 people. And I interviewed and went through a process and somehow I won, which is interesting because I was not my high school was very academic inclined and I was not very academic inclined at that point in my life. So it was interesting, but I think I had an opinion and I wanted to share it and they liked it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that officially launched your marketing career then, is that right?
It did. And as I joke, I didn't go straight to the pros. I went to college instead. So I went to University of Tennessee. And then from there, went to Johns Hopkins, got my master's from there. And then I worked in the George W. Bush administration, which used to mean that 50% of the people hated you and 50% of the people loved you. I think right now, like it's pretty well liked again. So I can use that more on my resume than I used to. Yeah, I worked in the Bush administration for the first 2.5 years he was in office. And then met a young lady up in DC and she was from Mississippi and we decided to move back. And so I decided to take what I'd learned in politics and government and translate that into banking and finance. And so then I hooked into marketing, corporate comms, public relations, government affairs. So all that kind of is in my shop now with Renaissance. Been here for 15 years now. I got about 8 people that report in our shop of marketing. We're a $15 billion bank. We're probably like the, 95th to 100th, somewhere in there, biggest bank in the country out of 4,000. So, pretty big. I mean, we're not Chase or Truist or Citibank, but we're also not the community bank on the corner that has 2 branches. So we're a nice growing regional bank.
That's awesome. So one thing I'm curious about just before we jump into the topic today is, an 8-person marketing team supporting a company that big. What's that like? Like what are the challenges that come with that? And how do you manage that?
Yeah. So the good part was we were remote before remote was cool. Or remote was necessary. I don't know that if it's cool yet or not, but you know the cliche. So we have someone in Atlanta, in our Atlanta markets. We have someone up in Memphis. We have someone near Jackson, a couple people in Tupelo, one in Oxford, Mississippi. So we're spread out, and we have a partner in Birmingham. And so we do that. We have a good agency that's here in Tupelo that specializes in financial services marketing. So it works. We could always use more. Everyone can use more. But having the right partners and vendors with agencies and production partners is always good. And then our team is pretty smart. We're pretty quick and pretty smart. We're young. We're very young, which marketing departments tend to be. But yeah, so we do well, and I think we punch above our weight class.
That's great. It's great to hear. I think there's a lot of marketing teams out there who probably face similar challenges and probably feel the same way about it, that, we're doing the best we can and punching above our weight class, and it's working. So awesome. Well, hey, John, I want to segue into our topic today, because I'm really excited to get into this, especially with your background, having written that book. And I think we're going to pull on some of that knowledge and research that went into that process. So as you and I talked about, what should our topic be today to discuss, you kind of proposed this idea of your marketing is not memorable, right? And I love that idea, because I think that many of us would hate to admit it, but it might actually be true for much of the marketing that we see out there. So tell me a little bit more about the context of why that topic today.
Yeah. So let me reframe before I get in there, rephrase it, because I mentioned to my wife we were going to do this podcast today, and she goes, "That sounded so negative." And I said, "Yeah, I don't need to come off that negative. Maybe it's the environment of 2021 and 2020 rubbing off on us that it's hard to break out and then talk shop even today. I mean, everyone wants to log in and see what's going on or watch what's going on Capitol Hill and other places. But to the point, I believe there is so much parity in industry marketing. Banks look the same. In fact, I've written about it. We've spoken about it. It's not an original thought I've had. Another person did the research. But 60 to 70% of all financial services companies share a common word. Well, how can you differentiate your brand when you have the same name and same product someone else does? Car commercials you see on TV, it's always someone yelling and some APR and some, come down here. It's the same stuff. I won't say every, because I don't like using terms that take everybody in, because there are brands that very much stand out. But I think when you get into a certain, like insurance now, everyone wants to be funny. I mean, Geico came out, but now everyone wants to have a funny thing in insurance. So it's like, insurance has gone funny. Finance tries to show service and concrete walls and, big marble. Car dealerships show someone yelling. So there's a certain kind of cliche stigma of every industry. And people just, for some reason, I guess it's just old thought, they can't break out of it. Now, some are more creative than others within their rails. But I think it creates marketing that's not very memorable, because it just gets lost in the mish of everything and in the mash of everything you see. And to make it memorable, I think you need a couple of things. People forget that customers want value. I think that's marketers, especially, because we're not really in sales. They've tried to combine it, because I think sales got a really negative rap in the 90s and early 2000s with, movies with like Alec Baldwin and Wall Street, and it was sell and all, it was negative. Sales is not negative. It's a good thing. You have to have it it's the gas that feeds your business. But marketing is not sales, and sales is not marketing. And I think a lot of marketers don't want to be in sales, but they forget that we have to support it. And so the communication has to. So an example would be $5 footlong. That's a very memorable pitch, and it's a sales pitch, but it's done through marketing. Same thing with 15 minutes or more saves you on your car insurance. It's a sales pitch with marketing that becomes memorable. And so when I say your marketing is not memorable, there's so many ads out there, especially big corporations. You see, I don't know what they're trying to sell and what value they're providing.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was getting at, that it's not memorable. I should have been how to make your marketing more memorable to be positive, because I try to be a negative person. But in that it is easy to critique a lot of marketing we see now that isn't memorable, that's on television, especially television. And I'm not even a big television marketer. I'm much more into digital, much more into geofencing and social media. But in that, because I think there's better value there for the marketer, especially for a regional player. But yeah, I think marketing has lost a lot of its memorability. And I think the good marketers and good companies, brands, and ad agencies that can make more memorable marketing are going to be the successful ones.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent intro into this. And as you're talking about that, you actually reminded me of I read a blog post this morning where someone was talking about this concept of creating the anti-persona for their marketing, right? We have personas where they're the people who we typically want to sell to, but he kind of described this idea of the anti-persona, or it's the people who think they want to buy your product, but it's not really for them for whatever reason, certain attributes, right? And I think that that's exactly right, that sometimes you have to go in the exact opposite direction of what everyone's doing, and it helps clarify your position and your differentiation. And so that's kind of what I'm understanding from what you're saying. Is there anything you would change or add to that?
No, I think you're dead on. It is we get stuck in a box in every industry. I'm not speaking just of financial services. I think you go in, you have certain compliance things you have to do in healthcare. You have
Mhm.
certain HIPAA laws. So there's certain things you can't do. If you're in accounting, they don't tend to market at all because they have certain CPA rules that says you won't market you're better than the next accountant. So it's just a picture or come see me. So you
Mhm.
can't differentiate there. Law firms used to not really market at all. And then the rise of trial lawyers over the years, and plaintiffs' attorneys and stuff like that, they really started out marketing each other, which created a difference for that legal category. And so, to your point, I think sometimes you do have to pull yourself out, and we try to do that at Renaissance.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, because I'll defend us to the day that we do some of this stuff. But it's like, what makes you different, and what value in that difference does the customer perceive from your brand? And so, yeah, to your point, I think that is where we are in it, and I'll leave it at that as we continue the discussion.
That's awesome. Love it. So the next point I want to get to is just, from your book, you kind of talk a little bit about the new 4 C's of modern marketing that can help brands put out marketing materials, content that help you become more memorable, right? Help you build a more memorable brand. So tell us a little bit more about those new 4 C's of modern marketing today.
Yeah. So anyone who's been in marketing or had a one-on-one marketing class got the 4 Ps.
Mhm.
It was price, placement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to walk all through them. But I'd looked at it and said, a lot of that has changed. Places changed. When the 4 Ps came out, there was no internet. This was written by Harvard and Michigan professors in like the 50s. So a lot of the P's and the ideas they had in marketing aren't really relevant today, although the foundations still are. I mean, you got to sell, you got to promote, whatever. But places is anywhere now. I've often said that nothing is more local than your front doorstep. I know a lot of shops small. Well, if the small business can't convert digitally, they're going to get beaten by the Amazons. I know everybody, Amazon using the cliche of business, but even the guy downtown, if he can't deliver to my door, if he can't use a DoorDash, or if he can't use some clothier can't deliver to my door, he's going to get beat because now the local is on your front doorstep in a box. It's no longer getting in your car. So I changed the P's to C's, and cliche enough, and I started with content. I think it always starts with content. What's your story? What are you trying to tell, and how are you producing it? So that's your content. Then you move to the connection. Who's your audience? You talked a few minutes ago about the anti-customer, the anti what you're looking at that you may miss because you're so in a box. So who do you connect with? Who's your audience? Then you have to convert. We have to stay in business. We can make, and this is what I love about marketers and creatives. A lot of times they can get super, and I'm one of them. You can get super awesome creative ideas, but they don't convert. Like they tell a story, but at some point they have to convert because we've got to sit down with our CFO and talk about budget and ROI and return. And so you've got to be able to convert. So it's content that connects, that converts. And then you do this through the vehicle of campaigns, because I still like the idea of succinct campaigns. Now, if something's good enough, it can stay going in perpetuity, but I do like campaigns as the vehicle to get there. And then I can add 2 more C's to that too that I left out. I should have done 6, but
Yeah.
books have to end. I think context is very important now too. People forget about context. Like I saw on Twitter they were talking about the protest yesterday. Someone was saying, when is Kylie Jenner showing up to give him a Pepsi? And I kind of laughed because you remember how tone deaf that commercial was. And I like Pepsi. I think it's a great brand. So I'm not picking on them and everyone makes a brand boo-boo every now and again. But I think that's a great example of where the context was wrong. Now it connected and it had content, but it didn't convert, and it didn't, the context was wrong. And then finally the client, you have to remember your clients. That's another C2 is remember above all this, it has to give value to a client. So that's my elevator, probably an elevator to the top of the Empire State Building pitch, but that's my 4C pitch on the book.
I love it. So content, connection, conversion, through a campaign, and then those other ones, context, and you got to remember that client. I love that. I think that those are super helpful and super relevant for marketing today, right? Modern marketing today. Just as you said, the 4Ps are great. It's a solid foundation, but it's dated. And I think most marketers feel that, and this feels more relevant for us today. So the one I want to dive into a little bit further is content, right? Because I think that that's something that, all of these C's are important, but you started with that one. I think there's probably a reason why you started with that one. That's a change that I've noticed a lot in marketing. I think many marketers have, where content now fuels every step of the buying process. It doesn't matter what industry, what vertical you're in. If you're B2C, B2B, doesn't matter. Content is so key. And so much of the buying process is taking place through content that consumers, consume before maybe even reaching out to the company who they want to buy from. So talk to me a little bit more about that. Why, I'm assuming you have seen the same thing. If not, tell me. But if you have, why is content just king and that linchpin in marketing today?
Because it's your story. I mean, all marketers and branders want to tell the story of the brand, and your content is your story. And a lot of times, especially at small businesses, which we bank small and large at Renasant, they don't spend the time for the quality in the content. It's not mic'd well. The lighting isn't good. And I'm getting into like more tactics now, but a lot of it isn't done well. And I think that reflects the business. If it's small and looks cheap, it might be perceived as cheap. Well, then all of a sudden you are cheap. And I'm not talking about cheap in pricing. I'm talking about in quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so content and the way you represent yourself in your content is super important. And I'll tell you what we've done, because what I don't like is when people talk on podcast stuff and they go into Nike and Amazon and Google and stuff they've never had any interaction with as professional. It's just stuff you can all relate to and see. But I'll give you an example with us is Renasant Nation. We have sort of a fan site, a brand site called Renasant Nation, RENASANT, NATION nation.com. And it's a content site. And we put all of our content up on that. I mean, we have a YouTube channel and all that stuff too, but we put it up there because we want to be able to get that content out quickly. So if a banker wants to go get content and post it on Twitter or post it on LinkedIn, they know where to go get it. But also it's one thing you have to find to the connection is that 90% of the people that visit a bank website go in there, log in and check their banking. They don't go around looking for products and stuff. So we already knew we had lost the customer when they go to our site. So we built a second site that we knew. Now it hooks in. It all hooks in together, and we use Pardot and we Salesforce. It's all, it's all tagged and stuff. But my point to that is the content is very important. And we try to do content that's cool and Southern because we're a Southern regional bank. So we do SEC Shorts, which is comedy about the football season. We do some So True Y'all videos about Southernisms and culture. We do sports. We do housing shows about and nonprofits in the South. So ours is very regional. It's very built on a brand about the South, and the content is built around how we understand our client. And as cliche as that sounds, because the bank always wants to understand and meet the needs of their client, service, yada, whatever. A lot of banks aren't doing what we're doing on the content front. And I can tell you because we had over 100 million views of our content last year on social media alone. And so the data says it, the connections say it, the tags say it, but content is so important. And that's why a lot of these small businesses beat big businesses on Facebook and you see like the shirt company that's making something or some new, organic deodorant or something that just the ad is so much better. I think there's Squatch or something like that I see all the time.
I've seen it.
I mean, their ads are great. And they probably shot it for $10,000, over a day. And it's better than anything I see Coke or Pepsi doing on social media. Yeah. So I think content, the quality of the content, the ability to represent your brand. And the other thing today with social media is you can control the narrative yourself. You don't have to throw it on TV in the middle of a commercial and everybody picks up their phone and misses it. You can literally see who's seeing it. You can comment on it. You can find clients from it, and then you can pull it down if you don't like it. Yeah. So there's a lot to be said about content and the ability to use it now that wasn't there in the past.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Going back to what we talked about at the very beginning here of marketing not being memorable today, right? To me, that really just illustrates the need for a brand, because brand is often who you are. Brand is who you are as a company. It highlights your differentiation and your value to your customers. So I feel like that memorable piece is synonymous with brand. And as you described it so well, one of the things that stood out to me that you said is content is so key to helping build that brand. If you create low quality content, even if you're in the grand scheme of things, if it's one business card or one flyer or one social post you put out there that isn't as high quality, it is a representation of your brand. It's either building or taking away from that brand that you're trying to build. It's either making you more or less memorable as it connects to all the other pieces of content people are consuming out there.
Yeah. And let me tell you this, a lot of people will hear this and they think, well, I can make a content piece. It's got to be amazing. I can't, maybe we're not creative. Maybe we don't have the dollars, whatever. There's a lot of brands that win through repetition.
Mm-hmm.
I can name a lot of, and I'm not going to call them out because it's not fair to a lot of corporate brands that it's not that memorable, but you see it so much. Like they just buy so much advertising space. They buy so much ads that it becomes memorable. So I think there's more than one way to do it. You can do it through repetition, or you can do it through truly being creative, with that one spot that plays a few times, or it's online and you see it and it's done through social to where it's not, and I'm not talking about television. A lot of people think it's just TV when you talk about repetition, but I know it's from the billboard to the email to whatever, however you're being presented this content. But repetition wins well too. So when we talk about creative, I don't want someone to think, well, I have to come up with the 84 Apple ad again that only played one time. And everyone knows, again, I'm jumping into cliche land on something I had no work with. But my point to that is repetition works as well. And I often talk about that in social is don't just post one time and be like, well, we posted, we did it. Mm-hmm. You've got to be active. You can't just have a presence. You have to be present. You have to be in the game, posting. I tell our team, I want 15 posts a day if we can do it, because I think the day of, well, don't be on social too much. Don't send too many messages. I think that's over with. I think now it's, if you have something of value or relevant that you think is interesting, put it out there and be present.
Yeah. And be consistent. Right.
Exactly.
That's great. So,
I need to add consistency. See, I'm getting a book. I need one more C and I can have another 4 C's in a book.
I know we're going to have 10 for you here by the time we're done, I think. This is great. You've shared a lot of really great examples, but I'm curious if you could walk us through an example that highlights at least these main 4 C's, something that you feel like was, a campaign, a piece of content that had that connection and conversion that really led to, it's just a good example for you of memorable marketing. Is there anything that comes to mind you could share?
Yeah, there's plenty of things we've done. One we've done recently was Kirk Herbstreit. He's the host of College Game Day, and he's a brand ambassador for us. We signed him up last year. We had grand hopes of all these customer events we were going to bring him to, and he was going to do all the spokesperson stuff and sign autographs, and it was going to be so cool and kick off the season at the College Football Hall of Fame, and it was going to be this big Renaissance splash for the South because, as you know, football is king in the South.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows that. I mean, Alabama's playing for the national championship on Monday night. So anyway, it's what people live and breathe here. Pandemic hit. So we had to reverse and think, what could we do with them? Well, we knew that digital was going to take off because people couldn't go in branches. There was a lockdown. So banking was going to be done on computers and phones. I mean, like that's going to happen because people still have to transfer funds, still have to get paid.
Yep.
So we took Kirk, we put him in a studio for half a day. And so that was our content. We were going to have Kirk do something called the Renaissance Replay. And someone was going to, do something wrong with their banking or do something wrong with a service we had or that they had with another bank, and then we would fix it. And Kirk was going to kind of commentate on it. So he was, oh, that's a fumble. He dropped his phone. So we did 6 or 7 of these little kind of skits. So that was our content. So I'll walk you through the 4 C's of it. So our content was going to be Kirk because he can kind of stand on his own, doing these little vignettes of whatever product we wanted to use for banking. Our connection was we knew he was popular in the South. We knew he's popular because of Game Day. Look, he's a good looking dude. Women and guys like him. Like he hits all the markets we want. Like, he hits every demographic because sports, clean cut guy, lives in Nashville, well-known, has, 1.5 million followers on social. So the connection was there. The conversion is if we use this as a social campaign and hit it up on social media and geofencing, targeting areas and dropping the ads on there organically and into articles and native advertisements, they can click on it and then go get the product by signing up online. So we had content with Kurt, a clear connection with who he is and our audience, South, football, sports, clean cut, good looking guy that everyone feels like they know because they've seen him. And then you can convert because you can click on the ad after and say, oh, I like that. We do cell phone insurance. So it's like, oh, that checking product offers cell phone insurance. I kind of want that. Click on it, sign up online. And then we ran through a campaign called the Renaissance Replay. So we had a campaign. We ran it during football season. It's now like right now ending.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, thousands of hits and views and pretty good sign up lift. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you asked for an example, and that one's really relevant because it like just ended and involved, good timing with digital coming to the forefront, good timing with mobile, good spokesperson during the right season with football. So it had right time, right place, good energy behind it. And due to the pandemic, it was obviously a product that people didn't have to go into a location and feel unsafe to sign up for.
Love it. I think it's a great example. So thank you for sharing that. And again, it ties back to how do you create memorable marketing that helps build a brand that's distinct, that's memorable, that stands out. And I think that's an excellent example, following those 4 C's and being able to do that. I think that's something that, any marketer can replicate, right? You can follow that framework of those 4 C's and think about what's applicable for you and for your business in order to create memorable marketing. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And, as we kind of wrap up here, John, I want to have you be able to put a plug in for your book, because I know a lot of this comes from your book. Tell us a little bit more about your book and the context of that, and what other lessons people can learn from that book.
So, thanks for the free promotion, there, I'll show it for those that watch it. You can't, obviously, if you listen to the podcast, I'm showing the book, No More Next Time, Marketing in the Age of Distraction. I really cover the 4 C's in it. And if you whiteboard a campaign, you can literally draw each word and go under each one and write your campaign out. You can do a marketing plan that way. What's our content? Who are we connecting with? How will we convert? What's the campaign? The campaign would get into your channels and your tactics, because that's how you create the delivery of it. So that's what I cover in the book. And I give some writing tips for marketing in there. I give some content tips. I give good examples and bad examples. Things like if you have a YouTube ad or not a YouTube ad, if you do really good YouTube content, which we were doing for a while on our channel, you'll find out that your competitors will find out and they'll buy ad space with interruptive placement ads in your YouTube. So then you need to turn off the ability for ads to be placed in your YouTube spots. And that was something before this, I didn't know. We were just throwing these stories on YouTube, these SEC shorts and kind of content pieces. And they would literally, competitive banks would buy, I feel like I've been talking to my kids, literally, that's all my 3 kids, and they say it all the time. But anyway, they would buy spots on our YouTube shows. So we've learned there's a lot of mistakes that I put in there, stuff like that you need to watch out for doing. So there's some good, I believe, tactical knowledge in it. It's a really easy read. It's 120 pages. I joke that it's more of a pamphlet, than a book. You can read it sitting down on an airplane flight from New York to Boston or something. But my point is it's a quick read. It's on Amazon, or you can get it on Kindle. It's like $1 on Kindle. I think it's $19 on Amazon or something like that. So anyway, I wrote it during March of this year, so it's still pretty fresh.
Yeah.
And it's called Marketing Age of Distraction is the subtitle, because I think we're all so distracted now with phones, social, what's going on in the world. And so there's so many messages hitting us at the same time.
Yeah.
And so how do you, market in that art of distraction and break through the clutter, to use another cliche, and really get memorable and get paid attention to?
Yeah. I love it. I can't wait. I just ordered it on Amazon just the other day. So can't wait for it to get here. And it looks like a great read. So John, thanks.
My kid's college fund appreciates it.
Yeah, I know. Thanks again for taking the time to share some of your wisdom and insight with us today. And, as we wrap up here, if there are listeners who want to get in touch with you, have follow-up questions or whatnot, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So the easiest way is LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Just look up John Oxford. You can put Renaissance or Amazon bestseller, whatever. I'm on there. John Oxford 1, as in the number 1 on Twitter. And then Marketing Money Podcast. That's the website, marketingmoneypodcast.com. You can look it up there. And I know we're running out of time, but I want to mention we have something in common, and this will full circle the whole talk. You and I are both Kansas City barbecue certified judges.
There we go. Why did we not connect on that in the beginning here?
Because I wanted to save it to make it full circle, because the talk started with flavor discussion. So I too was rated, and I used to go to those things years ago and do the brisket rating and all that stuff. So you and I share that for food, and I'm still trying to taste test my way into a career in that area.
I love that. Me too. You already have the background in that taste testing, so you might have a little bit of head start on me, but I'll have to plan to make a trip out there to the South one of these days, because you guys got so much better barbecue than we got out here in Salt Lake City.
I'll meet you in Memphis. We'll do that. We'll have
Deal.
to meet up in Memphis.
Deal. We'll have to plan that out. So, John, thanks again for taking the time today. This has been great. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
Absolutely. You too.